Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Christian Geeks Classic Rockcast. And today we have a special episode. We're going to be talking to our good friend, Todd Stevens, a.k.a. XL. And we just, on our last episode, we talked about XL and Death Before Dishonor, the kind of groundbreaking album that came out back in '93 called Sodom in America. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Well, it's a real pleasure to have you. I appreciate you responding to my message.
Yeah. Thanks for asking.
So basically, we wanted to get into the meat of kind of how you got started, but then kind of we'll go into a little bit later on. We'll talk to you a little bit about some of the really, really awesome things that you've got going on now, which we've actually touched on some in previous episodes here. We've talked a little bit about your Dale Thompson project and XL's innovation, stuff like that. So,
all right.
So let's talk about it. What are your influences? Kind of, where did you get started? Because let's face it, you kind of hit at about the time when rapcore and that sort of genre was really in its infancy. And for that to come out in Christian music was pretty groundbreaking.
It was, and I didn't even mean for it to be. As far as like my music background, I was just born into a musical family. Everyone in my family either sang or played an instrument. I was the last of four kids, so the youngest. And so by the time I was 5, I remember, being probably about 5, I can remember some things. There was drums, there was guitars, there was horns, trumpets, the piano, and a bunch of records in my house and 8-track tapes. So, and the way it worked was my brother that was older than me, the first one, he was way into funk and soul, R&B music, old school funk. And then the brother above him, my oldest brother, he was the rocker. He was into rock, Led Zeppelin, Judas Priest, Nazareth, then Lizzie, he had a Cheap Trick. Then my sister was into groups like, the Carpenters, Barry Manilow, Barbra Streisand, what's that one guy's name? I can't remember his name, but that more mellower type of stuff, Olivia Newton-John, that's what she was listening to. And then my parents listened to a lot of just straight gospel music, like old school Bible Belt gospel, black gospel, Southern gospel. So I had it coming at me from all angles. And as a kid, I learned to like all music. But my favorite was the rock. I liked the rock. That was my favorite. And, Kiss was my favorite band as a kid for probably 4 years, probably from 5 to 9. And then when I was 9 years old, of course, Motley Crue's Too Fast for Love came out on was it Leather Records before the Elektra picked it up. And I had a copy of that. And I was going around the neighborhood showing all my friends, like, check out this band, So, then I went through a phase where I always liked rock. I liked all music, but then, when Purple Rain came out, then I went and got all of Prince's earlier albums, which I had heard some of them, but then I went and collected all of them, and I was into Prince for a couple of years. Then as other, he's a weird artist, very eclectic, So the next couple of albums came out. I had him, I liked him, but then he kind of lost me as being the favorite artist. But then, I think around that time was when Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction came out, 86 or close to 87. No, man, that one blew my doors. I was like, wow. Well, anyway, and then of course in high school is when I really started getting into hip hop too. My brother, the one brother, along with his funk, there was a radio station that started playing earlier rappers like Grandmaster Flash and Curtis Blow and the Sugar Hill Gang, stuff like that, and those earlier rappers. So I was making rock music and rapping and stuff. And when I came into I became a Christian when I was 17. I grew up in church, but I didn't become a Christian until I was 17. And then around that time that's when I really started writing music. Someone had, the music leader at my parents' church had loaned me his 4-track, a little Tascam 4-track. So that's when I first started recording my own songs, writing stuff, and learning about recording on a 4-track and making beats. I bought a Alesis HR16 drum machine.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. So I was making my own beats and then playing, my own live, like I'd make a drum beat and then I'd play live music to it because I could,
Yeah.
And so then I there's a church out in California. I'm pretty sure it's still there. It was a church called Set Free. And Set Free made a documentary. They were basically a biker church. A bunch of bikers, pastor was Mexican. I think he was Mexican. He was some kind of Latino. But basically like a gang, just a street church. And they'd save songs, like they'd save Rolling Stones, Start Me Up, They say, we save another song, Gee, got me started and I won't stop, stuff like that. And they had their own team. They had their own like rap team that would rap. And then they did these concerts on Friday night. So it was actually my second concert that I ever did as a rapper. I talked to Pastor Phil's son. His name was Geronimo. And I was like, hey, can I get up and rap? And he's like, can you rap? I was like, yeah. He's like, you got a demo tape? I was like, yeah, So I tossed my demo tape and he's like, okay, you can rap this Friday. And so I did. And then I ran into MC Peace or Peace 586 from Freedom of Soul. And I had already met the Twins because there was a band I was in called Willing Vessel with a guy named Bob Moon. Bob Moon was kind of an engineer in the industry for like I think Brandon Ebel, Tooth and Nail hired him for a while to engineer a lot of their projects. Well, me and Bob were in a band. He was one of the first Christian friends I had, and we were in a band for about a year together called Willing Vessel. I had some pretty good stuff, and then me and Bob just kind of quit hanging out. He actually did some engineering on Sodom and America. But basically what happened, he knew this guy named Andre Walton. I don't know if people know. Andre Walton was a professional skater, Christian skater. Right. And he put out a record on Arise Records that had it was a compilation record of artists that he was like pumping. And so you had like SFC and then, like MXPA, a lot of just a variation of artists. Well, Andre Walton's was dating Bob Moon's sister. I think that's how it works. Does that work? No. Let me get this right. Well, Bob's brother was dating Andre Walton's sister. That's what it was.
Gotcha.
I think they're still together. So Andre knew all these guys. He knew the Twins. He knew SFC. All these hip hop cats are down in California. So they started hanging out at Bob's house, and that's how I met the Twins, and I met Chris that way. But the Twins kind of took me under their wing, started taking me around, and they were already doing shows. They were already connected to Brainstorm Records. At that time, it was called Broken Records. Mm-hmm. But the Twins were on deck to put out their album. And Chris, SFC, had already put one out and actually had put two out by the time I met him. He was on his second album. So these guys, they started letting me hang out, and they realized it's like this dude XL can play. He could play instruments. So, for hip hop back then, sampling was huge, but if you could get somebody that could play stuff, then you didn't have to sample. So I started playing bass lines and guitar parts on all these guys' records. Well, anyway, so let me see, where was I going with this? Oh, well, okay. So I got introduced into the industry doing rap, hip hop. Mm-hmm. And then what happened was the Twins, after doing several shows, after they put out their record, they got asked to go on tour with DC Talk and the Newsboys and this girl group called Heather and Kirsten. Mm-hmm. Heather and Kirsten were on Arcade Records, which was a subsidiary of Maranatha Records.
Right.
So, and then they asked me if I'd go on tour. So next year I'm on tour with the Twins and DC Talk and the Newsboys on their New Thing tour, their DC Talk's second album. Mm-hmm. So after I came back from that tour, I was offered record deals. And plus Arcade Records had me do a Christmas rap on, they put out a Christmas album. I can't remember, 1991 or something like that. And so when I got back, I had offers. I had an offer to do like another like kind of compilation with Arcade Records, to do a compilation with Ocean Records, which was the Crucified's label at that time, the Pillars of Humanity. But then Brainstorm offered me a full album, a full record deal.
I just happened to have that later.
Yeah. And so all of my friends that I was hanging out with, they were all on Brainstorm, or the Twins, SFC, Freedom of Soul. And then really, I think it was Peace 586 that really pumped me up to Joe Taylor. It's like, hey, you should sign this dude, So I got a deal, and Chris was producing it. Super C was Soup the Chemist, now he calls himself. I used to call him Super C, as was his name. But anyway, we finished 18 songs. We're gonna put out 18-song hip hop album. Had them all all the pre-production was done, and but I had been experimenting because one of my brothers says, one of my brothers didn't like the drum machine. He's like, "Dude, you need to play live music and put your raps to live music. You need to just, like some more rock tunes. He's like, you need to rap over that." And I was like, all right. So I started just making some demos. And I think the first song I did was Die. That sells. I made a demo of Die. And DJ Dove from SFC, he was into the stuff. He liked it. He's like, "Man, Todd, you need to do this stuff. You need to do whatever." And so one day we were hanging out with Gene Eugene, and we were doing pre-production stuff for the hip hop record. And DJ Dove was like, "Todd, play him that song. Play him the one song." And so I played him the demo that I had of Die. And Gene is like, he's like, "We're doing this." He's like, "Do you have more songs?" I go, I got a whole album of songs, man. I've got a whole album. He's like, "That's what we're doing." And this was 2 weeks before I was going to the studio. He's like, "This is what we're doing." And I was like, okay. And then I think, Joe was the one who signed me or whatever. Like, I don't know, those guys kind of split up artists. And then I kind of became Gene's artist. And so Gene Eugene was the one who started working with me on it. And we went to the studio 2 weeks later and just started, recording. And I don't know, like, word got out to people of what was happening, because I'm hanging out with all these hip hop people. Then all of a sudden, like, Gene had called Jimmy Brown, and Jimmy Brown, when I get to the studio, Jimmy's rig is set up. I played all of Jimmy's gear. I played his 72 Gibson Explorer, his Mesa Boogie and all. He dialed in this tone. So the tone that you hear on Song America, Jimmy dialed that in.
Wow.
And then the drummer from Violet Burning had his drum set there for me. And so, and then these guys are just hanging around. It's like people are hanging out, and I start recording these songs. Next thing you know, it's like, because I didn't care. I didn't need private sessions. It's like people are showing up. The rappers are coming to show up. The Crucified's coming to hang out. Michael Phillips from Deliverance is coming to hang out. And so whoever was in the studio, I was just like, "Here, get on this track. Get up here. You play on this. Can you solo on this?" Or the hip hoppers would be in there or whatever. And like EDL, Ted Crookley from Everyday Live, he was hanging out. So all the background, all those gang vocals were just people that were just hanging out in the studio. It's like you get in the vocal booth and And so it was like, it created its own buzz because no one had done that in the Christian industry yet. And not only that, then you had the whole like phenomena of, well, this is a rapper. He's a black rapper, he's a hip hop guy. Mm-hmm. But listen to him playing metal. Listen to the metal, It's good metal. And, he's not such a shabby rapper either, And I didn't know. I was just doing what I do, I was just doing what I do. And, so that was the process. The guys on the cover, Doug Shumway, I played with Doug a whole lot. Doug's the guy on the cover with the long hair. He was my neighbor from across the street. Excellent bass player. Played with him for years. When I moved away from Iowa, of course, to Iowa, that messed things up for us playing. But anytime I was in California, we always played. Brett Cadell is a guy in the back. He fronted Wicked Zen. I don't know if you heard of Wicked Zen. Wicked Zen, they're a good band, man. They almost were signed a couple different times and never got signed, but they put out their own stuff. Really good band. But anyway, he fronted Wicked Zen for a while. Brett passed away in 2008, but he's the guy that does the lead vocals on My So-Called Friend Death. And then James Timoney, the guy that had all the beats and stuff on the front, he he was just a hype man for me. He'd get on stage and like background vocals for me. He also helped out Chris a whole lot. I think he was on some of Super C or SFC's records and stuff. So that band, that group of people, we only played a few amount of shows together. XL DVDs had so many dang members, you know. This one is a Brandon Graves. I think it's Brandon Graves. It might be Gravely. I should know his last name. It's a bummer. Excellent drummer, man. His name is I think it's Brandon Graves. He's on Facebook and he's thinking his chops are. So he came out. Brett that was on the album. When I was going to play Cornerstone, he invited this drummer out to the house, and I didn't even know who he was. And I was actually getting ready to move to Iowa, and this drummer shows up from Kansas City, and I'm like, you know, who are you? And he's like, well, I was invited out here to play in the band. I'm like, what? I'm looking at Brett like, what are you doing, you know? But it was a lifesaver because I didn't have a drummer to play at Cornerstone. So this guy, he shows up, and we have like 2 rehearsals to play Cornerstone in '93. And then he goes back to Kansas City, and that was it. And just we show up to play the show, and we had all kinds of mishaps going to Cornerstone '93. My brother's bass got stolen, and I actually ended up having to sell my guitar to make it out there, to get gas to make it out.
Oh my gosh!
So we pull up to Cornerstone, and we're barely on time. I mean, we pull up and we have 5 minutes to go on stage. That's how late we're running. And the drummer knew we didn't have any gear, so he figured out a way to have their stuff up there on gear. You know, we walk up on stage and they hand us stuff, and we just start playing. And you know, we kind of went on tour. The first time we went on tour, and we opened up for Dig Jesus opened up for us, and so we get to that show, and they're playing. It's like, hey man, can you guys stick around so we can use your gear to play?
That's pretty funny. Yeah, I just posted that video on our Facebook page today of the '93 show.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That was crazy stuff, man. That was probably one of my best shows to date. I mean, that tent you can't see from the DVD or the film. Someone, I don't even know who posted that. Someone, a fan, I guess, was out there. And I'm glad because one of the guys on stage has some footage of it, but I don't know if he still has it or not. But man, that tent was just packed out, and it was just nuts, you know. And I of course, I'm like, hey, if you guys know these background vocal parts, just get up here on the stage. So after about 3 or 4 songs in, I got like, you know, 6 people on that mic, 6 people on this mic, and then just the stage diving and stuff. It was just nuts. And I'm trying to get to the merch table after the show. It took me 5 hours to get to the merch table just from being stopped so much, you know. I didn't know, man. I was just doing what I do. I didn't know like it was a kind of a revolutionary thing at that time.
You know, I was thinking about the other day when we were preparing for the episode to talk about that album. You know, you had Run DMC and Aerosmith do Walk This Way in like 86. And it was such a huge deal to everybody because we talked about on the episode a little bit about how, and even through the early 90s, like the rap community and the metal community, it was like a white and black thing. And it was like different styles of music and they each had their own. But the crossover was they were both like really in your face, you know? Right. And so like if looking back on it, like it made sense that there could be some crossover, but it was such a revolutionary thing. And I was saying on the episode about how, you know, Body Count was the first that I knew about it. And then you were like right after that. And I was like, this is huge.
Rage Against the Machine came out 5 months before my record did.
Yeah, Rage Against the Machine is another good example.
My brother showed me them. He was the first one to show me, and I was kind of mad. I was like, man, these guys they're good, you know? And I'm trying to do the same thing. What's funny is Epic picked up the record from Brainstorm. You know, Brainstorm and Word had some kind of deal with Epic that certain artists that Epic deemed worthy, they'd pick up and they'd push them. You know, yeah. So I was one of the artists that got picked up by Epic, and funny that Rage Against the Machine was signed by Epic, right? So that was pretty cool for me. You know, my first album that comes out, and it's like you got a label. Michael Jackson's label was on my back of my record. I kind of like that.
Oh,
but they weren't my level. I was still signed to Brainstorm.
Yeah. Well, can I just say how happy I am that you didn't make a Carpenters album? I mean, can I just say, just for me, I mean, it's totally selfish.
Not that you couldn't.
Not that you couldn't.
Not that I couldn't.
Maybe in the future you'll do a Barry Manilow type Christian record.
I don't know, man. I hope I don't do like these guys do. They get old, they get all soft. I don't
think if you haven't done it by now, I don't think.
Yeah, no, I'm totally joking. But I really do think that it was such a huge album for me because I was into those Christian rappers, and I was into, man, I remember when DC Talk came out and all those, what was the Disciples one? DOC, right? Or Disciples of Christ or whatever they were. And man, I was in a lot of that stuff. And for me, who had some experience in, church is still very segregated, too much so, right? But back then it was even more so. But I had experience in both. And I was just so enamored with what you guys are doing. And it did feel like it really had that energy on the album. Like, this is just a whole bunch of people getting in a studio, rocking and having fun. I want to know how Mark from Crucified got on there. Like, did he help write that song? Because I can,
he wrote his verse. He wrote the verse that he delivered as his.
Okay.
I wrote my verse, and that's really funny because, I can't remember how a lot of us just started hanging out with the Crucified. We started going to all the Crucified shows, and they started coming to all the shows that we did. Like, when I was playing with SFC, I remember I'd get on the a lot of times I'd play, if there was a drum kit there, I'd get on the drum kit and play like live drums to the tracks and stuff. I remember one specific show that we did, and Jim was there. Jim Chaffin was there, and he kind of marveled. Because, he at that point, he's this excellent punk drummer. He's fast, got, wrist. But he says to me, he's like, I don't really have the groove factor. Like, I can't groove like how you're grooving. So he's sitting there watching me play, and it's not like I'm playing anything that he couldn't play, but I don't know. And so I kind of hit it off with Jim because he respected me as a good drummer. And at that time, of course, Mark was into hip hop. He put out the album Native Son, which I thought was a good album myself. I thought Mark showed that he's got rap, he can rap. I don't think everyone else received it very well. His genre fan, which is one of the sad things about how that was working. And I think that Sodom in America did bridge a little bit of a gap, that a separation, a segregation in Christian music that was there. Because, the hip hop guys weren't really hanging out with the metal guys, and vice versa. It wasn't happening a whole lot. So around that time, all my homies, we'd go check out these punk bands, and we'd go get in the mosh pit and stuff, and so then the Crucified started hanging out with us too. So we became friends. And when I did my demo for Sodom in America, I showed it to Mark, and Mark, he liked it, and he was like, I was like, well, dude, you want to get up on this one? And he's like, yeah, yeah. And that's how it happened. I mean, he wrote his verse, came in. And so then since they all came in, they all came to hang out. So Greg's there, and I'm like, Greg, you want to do some solo, solo? So Greg soloed on a couple of the tracks. Yeah, and I became pretty good friend. Me and Mark, we hung out quite a bit then until I moved away. But and then of course I went on tour with them. I toured right before my record was coming out. They asked me to go on tour, so I was ready. The studio stuff was done, and I think they went on tour at the beginning of '93 with Mortal, and then of course Applehead, which was Greg's thing, and then me. And the Crucified backed me, so they were Death Before Dishonor, and the best band to date that played my stuff. And it's funny because first few shows they had to just figure out how things would go if we could even fit it in. So it came down after like 2 or 3 shows, like, okay, we'll do 2 of your songs, we'll do 2 of the Applehead songs, and then of course the Mortal did a full set and Crucified did a full set. So we actually just went backstage and talked the song out because we'd never practiced. So went out there and we talked through through each section, verse, chorus, blah, 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 and just went out there and played them. And these guys just nailed it, It was so cool. It was so cool. And and then Mark did his verse. We did South America, of course, and then we played Sifting with the Sickle, which is the song that Greg soloed, another song that Greg soloed on. But that was it. That was the first taste for people of XL and Death Before Dishonor live. And of course, Doug Van Pelt did the series, the HM magazine series of, it's on VHS that
right.
The Crucified's on, and I'm on it. It's the one that has Rose is on it, and Stryper and Guardian. So I got a spot in that, which was pretty cool. But yeah, that's how that came about. We somewhere we started seeing each other's shows and started going to each other's shows.
Well, it's funny because that clears up a little something in my head, because for years, I always had XL and Death Before Dishonor and the Crucified like linked at the hip, like the Crucified was Death Before Dishonor. And I think that probably the misconception probably comes in from that first tour.
Yeah. I mean, for that truth, they were Death Before Dishonor. I mean, that's the first Death Before Dishonor that anyone saw.
Right.
And then so after that, the other shows, and that's why, the band, I don't know who, there's the Death Before Dishonor has more members than we know of.
It's like Steve Taylor in some band.
At one point, another neighborhood friend of mine, Mike Nichols, was the drummer. Of course, for several years, my older brother was the drummer. My older brother Eric, both of my brothers were in XL and DVD at one point. Brian J. from the band Keel. I don't know if you know of Keel, Ron Keel, K-E-E-L, band that Gene Simmons produced. Brian J. was in my band for a year. Excellent guitar player. He played in the band from 95 to 96. Who else? There's a guy named Phil Lombardo that's out here in Iowa. Is virtuoso Steve Vai type guitar player. He played in the band. Dude named Sean Garuli. And there's probably so many people that are going to get mad for me forgetting. I don't remember where I park at Walmart anymore, so it's hard for me to remember who was in my band.
So there was what, 23 years between releases for XL and DVD. So what was going on? 93
to 2016. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's going on in that 23 years musically for you?
Realistically, I chose marriage, and I was a starving musician. I mean, as a single guy, I made enough money doing shows to, buy myself hamburgers and whatnot. And, but like right after the first tour I went on, which wasn't very big, I got married and I had to start working. And so it was hard for me to put together a band. I mean, I did a lot of local shows in California, just, show here and there. But what should have happened is I should have probably secured my career in the music industry, which, I mean, I could have easily did what POD did, because I came out before POD. I didn't play, and I didn't show myself and I already had a following. So I think a lot of people were just kind of bothered. It's like, dang, who the heck is this group? These guys are killing it. Where do they go? That's kind of how it was, And I mean, it's one of the things I regret. Of course, looking back, it's like, did I make the right decision choosing love over music career? Well, I think so.
Yeah.
I think that was the right thing to do that I did, because and then also, you get older and you look back at yourself and you see who you are more, hindsight in 2020. I think God knew what he was doing, because if I would have blown up and got famous, through the years, even without fame and money, I had a tendency to struggle, backslide from time to time, and, have to repent of things. If I'd have had money in my pocket and fame and all that, man, I would have probably blown it for the Christian industry big time. I probably would have slipped up, hooking up with girls and stuff like that. I mean, I can say that now because just the way I grew up, and I became a Christian. I was serious. I'd walk the walk strong. And then I'd have these moments of weakness, but my moments of weakness is, when someone, if you backslide, you slip up, you go back to do whatever your thing was, for me, it's partying, running the streets, hanging out with the wrong people. And so every now and then I'd have these episodes of that happening. And I don't know, I think God just knew that, it'd probably be better if I wasn't out in the limelight having those kind of issues, or getting to a place where my walk with God was just more firm. And now that is kind of the case, it's like he's bringing me back into doing music. I've been doing music again over the last few years, and I'm really looking for a band. I need a band. I need a Death Before Dishonor. And it would be cool if I could get, like, Rex Carroll he was willing to tour with me. I've had all kinds of people that are willing to tour with me, heavy hitters. But just making it happen, especially living in different states, it's tough. And really what I want what happened on the first album. I want an all-star band. I want 4 people that people know already. It'd be cool to have, like, Jimmy Brown, Rex Carroll, maybe Jim Chaffin on drums, or Jesse Sprinkle, or
yeah.
But I don't know. I guess I'm just dreaming. I think I can make it happen someday. We'll see. I mean, I finally, speaking forward, like finally doing a record with another one of the icons that I grew up listening to, Del Thompson, did a full album with him. So,
right.
Who knows what that can, and Dale said he's retired from touring, but he says, well, never say never, because I think Dale actually likes this record that we did.
Mm-hmm.
He says
the clip is pretty awesome. I mean, the clip is really
amazing.
And the thing is, and the one thing that I can say, going back and listening to, Offensive Truth and all the stuff, and even Excel's Innovation, which I want to talk about that in a few minutes too. But
so good.
But your songwriting chops are still awesome. I mean, still really good. And obviously your musicianship, I mean, for people who don't know, you clearly are, you know your way around the music room. I mean, you can play pretty much anything in there and do it well. So, I mean, recording wise, you probably don't need the all-star band is cool.
Yeah.
You don't need them. But but ultimately it's like, I feel like, did you make the right choice? I think you probably made the right choice back in the 90s. But I think now if the God sees fit to let you do that, I mean, I think it's like you're like a beast that's been sort of caged up. And I feel like,
You're right about that.
Because I mean, everything
that's accurate.
Like everything I've heard is just really, really good. And I mean, this one man's opinion, but it's you're not phoning it in other words.
No.
So.
Man, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. It helps when people like what you like your work,
Yeah, it's good stuff.
No, that sucks, man. That sucks.
Yeah. You didn't mention a bass player, and no one knows who I am, but I'll play bass. I'll play bass for you.
You play bass?
Oh yeah, that was my thing.
We're off to a good start.
And I was a metal bass player. I did a lot of that, But
all right.
But it was but
I know who you are.
Oh, you know who I am.
Yeah, you're famous to me.
There's like my kids and my mom think I'm really good. No, no, but dude, as we're sitting here talking, as Steve said, you really know your way around music, and I think that really does help you when you're writing those songs. In a different way, I think you are like a Prince sort of artist, because Prince was eclectic because he knew music. He could go from funky hip hop to rock to blues. He could go to all this stuff. And you have a lot of those chops too. And, just some of those recent albums that you've made, like Innovations was, I mean, like, dude, that's like amazing. But then, you went into some other things where, you did more of like some pop songs. And I mean, it's just really, you have a lot of eclectic styles to you as well. And I think, but I think that helps in your songwriting, makes it creative, and you keep it really, really strong. So, what do you think it's been about the last, you talked about your spiritual walk, but you think it's been, you think like the rise of the internet and like the availability of your own recording equipment is like, that's kind of easier now. Like, what do you think it's been over the last 10 or 15 years that's really helped you get back into it?
Well, a calling. I have a calling.
Amen.
Yeah, there's a verse. Geez, and I should know where it's at. I believe it's in Romans. I could find it on my phone, but it says the gifts and callings of God are without repentance. And so, whatever gift or calling God's given to you, that's what he wants you to do. That's what he always wanted a person to do. He just wants to make sure it's always his, and it helps if a person's life matches. For me, the best musical success I've ever had is when my life matched everything I was saying. And I don't mince words. I mean, everything I wrote and everything I said it's from something I've experienced. I mean, it comes from me, my viewpoint, what I've seen, what I've been through. And I've been through some junk. I've been through some rough stuff in life. My marriage has been rough. We're a walking miracle. We have faced everything that causes any other couple to split, to be done. And time and time again, we've made it through. Sometimes my focus needed to be more on that than trying to go and make it, There was one time when I was not doing well and me and my wife were actually split up. I joined this band called Radio Moscow. And Radio Moscow, they're pretty big in the underground psychedelic blues scene. I mean, these guys they're in Rolling Stone magazine. They're in a movie called The Goods. What's the guy's name from the Black Keys? I can't remember. I can't believe I don't know his name. Shucks. Anyway, the guitar player from the Black Keys produced this band's first record. And so anyway, I go on tour with them. I'm touring and they're headlining every place and they're getting ready to go overseas and play all these festivals overseas where it's kind of like a Jimi Hendrix thing. These guys went over there and just blew the mess up. They wanted me to go. And it was basically, if I would have went on that tour, it probably would have been the end of my marriage, And so I had to make the decision, like, do I go on this tour or do I not? And so I didn't. And of course you have musicians dread is like, dang, these guys blew up. Next thing they're in Rolling Stone magazine. They're, opening up for playing with all these big bands. Here's a story. We were playing in Richmond, Virginia, and I'm sure y'all know Lamb of God, the metal band Lamb of God. So we're playing in Richmond, Virginia, and at a sushi bar of all places. We were in a sushi bar playing, and I'm getting there, and I'm talking to this dude. I'm just talking to this guy. We're talking for about 20 minutes, and he's like, yeah. So he's talking to me about our turn experience, and I'm just kicking the can with him, And after I'm done talking to him, he's got this long white beard, and the promoter comes up to me. He's like, hey, you ever heard of Lamb of God? I was like, yeah. So that's their bass player, John Campbell. I'm like, what? Then I'm like, what? Lamb of God. I was like, you're a Lamb of God? He's like, yeah. He's kind of like, he didn't want to hype. I was like, dude, man, I'll just listen, then I'm like, and so then like he came, he's like, yeah, man, the promoter just showed me, he's my friend. He showed me your guys' stuff just this morning. I was like, I got to come check these guys out. And I'm like, what the heck, John Campbell from, I think that's his name, John Campbell. Anyway, he's like, he's coming to see me and I'm like, all giddy, but anyway, and then we went on tour. We toured with this band called Witchcraft from Sweden. And they're pretty big. These guys are, when they're offering some stuff too. I mean, they So anyway, that was in 2006, from 2000 or 2007, and I played with them off and on from 2007 to 2009, and that was a kind of an off period for me where I had to work through some stuff, and we're still all friends and everything, but I had to go the way of Christ. I mean, there's nothing else for me but Jesus, and I know sometimes you have to be reminded of what you already know.
So one of the things we talked about on the episode was song titles, and how amazing your song titles are. So as a songwriter, let me ask you the question: does a song title come to you first, or does the song or the melody, or is it just everything's different? Like, because your song titles are so strong. As a songwriter myself, I'm thinking, I think that maybe the title comes and then he just, builds around that idea. I don't know.
It happens various ways. Sometimes I'll dream a song. I mean, I've been privileged to dream about 20 songs that I was able to catch. And say capture a song. And the way I capture a song is if I'm dreaming the song right when I wake up. And if right when I wake up, then I got to go right away and grab some kind of device and quickly put it down, because if I go to the bathroom first, it's gone, Mm-hmm. And so some of my songs I've dreamed, and then I'll have a hook in the dream. And then that's what the song's called. It was, I don't know, from God or my subconscious, whatever. That's one way I get song titles. Another way is just, I just write about what I see in life. On the first album, I had help. Like, I think James Timoney, who was on the album cover, he came up with the title Brother to the Saboteur. I think he also came up with Brink of Insanity, or Sifting with the Sickle. But like all the Offensive Truth songs, some of those songs were supposed to be on my second album that would have came out in 1994. So like Rapist was going to be on the next album. Daddy's Too Friendly, Failure. That was my second album. So what I did was a lot of the songs that were supposed to make that album, I put them out instead of like, let me try to sound like, new, or some people think it was up to date. Like those were songs that I was supposed to put out in the 90s, which would have been another cutting edge record if Rapist was out in 94 instead of 2015, or, My Hour of Desperation that Jim Chaffin played on. But, I didn't put out a record. So it's like, well, here's XL DVD's second album, and so the reason how it became a double album is the guy that I've been working with out in Daytona Beach, Florida, who also is the engineer and did some mixing on this project I'm doing with Dale, The Reconciled. His name is Matt McEwen. His name is spelled McKeown, but it's McEwen is how you pronounce it. And Matt has done me some justice. He's did all my last 5 records now. 4. Or is it 5? Well, 5. Yeah, 5 records. He was an XL DVD fan. I think he's like 4 or 5 years younger than me. And, for him, it was like a cutting edge thing of like, it helped him to keep his faith, because he was at that brink of like, is this thing ever real? Is this even, and then you hear XL DVD talking about what I'm talking about, and you're 16, 17 years old. And at that time, some of the stuff I said, like I got taken out of several bookstores, especially the song Die, when I say, if racism was a man and I had a 12 gauge, I shoot him in the head in the Lord God's name, out the stores, buddy, Christians don't talk like that,
That's a little too real, man.
That's too real. But, so for, I think for a lot of kids back then, I mean, to this day, and it regardless of whatever I've been through, it's like, it's good to hear people say, man, that record right there is something that helped me walk with God, It's good to know that something that came out of you, that God birthed in you, is still bearing fruit, and in a positive way. Makes it not in vain, even though I didn't make $1 million off it,
Right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, and so one of the songs on Sodom in America, just go back to that for a minute, is one of my playlist songs. So, it's okay that, you don't listen to the podcast, but there's some songs that I don't know why, but I put on every playlist. I mean, I've got, there's a Crucified song on there. There's, and Fatal Blow is one of those songs. And so just being totally selfish, to me, I don't know why that song hit me, but it was not just me, it was a lot of my friends. We'd be going to other concerts and we would put your CD in and we would play that song and we would do the whole song and we would listen to the whole album, but that was the song, man. So what's the story behind that song?
Well, I ran the streets as a teenager. I it's kind of weird because I was brought up well. My father's a doctor. Joined the church before I was born, so I was raised well. We lived in a well-to-do neighborhood, But the way Riverside, California is set up is all these subdivisions. So you have, a middle-class neighborhood, and you take a 5-minute walk, and then you're in Hillside, which is the hood. Or you drive 20 minutes across town, you're in the East Side 1200 block, which is the hood. And so for me, I went to private school, but I went and hung out in the hood, hung out in the rat traps and different places. So you just see these different scenarios of people's lives, and basically I wrote about some of the people that I was associated with, and how from certain people's perspectives, you can't change someone's perspective. And, some people don't know how to respond to authority well because of being abused, because of being, always under somebody's thumb or something, so you don't respond to authority. And because of being abused, because of a hard life, sometimes you become bitter, you become very angry, and the end result of that. And see, I used to like writing songs because I wanted to get out of the whole Christian, because in Christian songs, it's okay to write 2 verses about a jacked up situation, but the third verse better be about someone coming to Jesus, right?
They're coming to Jesus and their life has totally changed.
But that's not always how it goes. Is it? That's not how life always is it?
Right.
And what's wrong about writing a song about the truth of this dude had a bad attitude? I don't give none, but I demand respect, Watch your step, take cover. I'll put you 72 inches under. Yeah. Now, these are the kind of people that I hung around with, and then finally at the end, right, this guy gets into it with somebody and takes a bullet. There you go.
Where's the happy ending, man?
Really, the message in that, if there's a godly message in it, is that
yes, exactly.
You can't live like that. You can't. A man reaps what he sows. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. And if you don't submit yourself to God, you will die by default of what God, by God's principles. You live this way, you die, you go out that way. And that's all. So
Oh man, I totally agree. So I'm also an author, and so every story is about a character who believes a lie and has to come to the truth by the end of the story, right? Whatever that lie, it could be a funny lie, it could be a misconception, it could be misunderstanding, it could be a lot of things, right? But a comedy is when they believe the truth and their life changes for the good, right? When they come to the truth and they realize who they really love, or they realize who their real family is, or whatever, right? And they get community and life out of. But a tragedy is when they hold on to the lie anyway, and bad stuff happens at the end. Like, that's a tragedy. But either way, the truth wins.
Yes.
Either way, the truth is going to win. And so that's why I love songs like that, is because, like, you're right, I'm not saying it wasn't always genuine, but sometimes it did seem a little forced in some of the Christian music, where it was like, where they would tell this really dark song and it was like, well, we got to, now I believe in Jesus and everything's great.
Yeah, that'd be a ray of hope at the end of it.
And
are you talking about Christmas shoes? I'm just kidding.
And that same thing, the Brink of Insanity is the same thing too. Brink of Insanity, like this dude, he goes, didn't want to, abuse. He gets abused till he loses it. So I guess the message in that is like, upbringing. Upbringing has a lot to do with how someone's going to turn out many times, Jesus doesn't, let me put it this way. I was going to say Jesus doesn't save everybody, but let me say Jesus is not always able to save everybody because of devil's interference, of them not being able to recognize the light, even though it's shining right in front of them. They can't see it, So I like writing about stuff like that too, just this real circumstances, this life circumstances, rapists. It's a real deal, man. I know so many girls that live that life. I have close friends that's their life. Someone in their family messed with them. A father or an uncle or someone, and it messed up their life for good. And then so on the other side of that, you got somebody that knows a girl that understands the story of what happened, And then they got to try to harness their anger and their rage of what happened, what was done to someone they really care about. And you know, are they going to take this person out or try to let the law take care of it? And sometimes the law isn't going to take care of it the way that someone thinks it needs to be taken care of, you know? Mm-hmm. So that's why the last line I say, God forgive us. You know, God forgive us, because this is just how it goes, you know? And then it's another area where the devil succeeds in wreaking havoc in our lives from doing something wrong that shouldn't never been done. And or daddy's too friendly. Yeah, I touched on those issues just because that's how it happened. Now, for me, I was able to write about those things from being around those type of situations, but it never happened in my own home. You know, I was not a victim of any of those types of things, but I had friends that went through it, you know, and I came to be able to understand it. And so I just wrote about it because a lot of people, no one else is going to do it except for me, lust control.
So, I mean, you've put all this music out independently for the most part since the first album. Rock's Records, I guess, has helped you release some of these things. Is generally speaking, in listening to you've mentioned a couple of the songs that are a little more hard hitting than others. And it's like, are record companies generally going to shy away from that sort of thing, especially Christian record labels, I would assume probably don't want to touch that.
I don't know. And see, I just quit steering. I steered away from the whole record label thing because it's, they've always been, they're robbers, they rob. And, right now I just use CD Baby because they pay me 90% of, I take my chances on selling less records and getting all the money as opposed to, a label that may help you sell records. Right. The whole record label thing is just about obsolete and everybody knows that. I thought about, should I try and do something that can be picked up by like Capitol since they're putting out Christian artists now? And I know Time Warner was for a while. I don't know if they still do or not. I thought about it, trying to go that route, but
the world, it doesn't work that way much anymore, especially for guys like you.
You just got to push yourself, and for me, the thing that's crippling me, if I can use that word, is I don't tour. I haven't played with a band, and I've played some shows. We opened up for Striper in 2018. That was a cool show. A band I played with was good, but I just can't find a band that are good. But it's like, I'm picky. Since I did my own stuff, it's like, learn my stuff how I played it. Whenever I play with someone else's band, or when I sit in and they have a CD of it, I try to learn to play it what I hear. I guess because I can. I mean, when I played with Radio Moscow, this guy, he's picky. He's a talented guy, and he did all the music on his CDs too, except for I think he let his bass player play, but he did the guitar and the drumming. So when I sat in as a drummer, I studied what he did, and it was tough because he's a good drummer. And so after the first practice, he's kind of sitting there, and I heard he was firing drummer after drummer, and so he's sitting there, he's like, well, you think you might want to practice another time? I'm like, yeah, man. And I knew right then, it's like, oh man, I passed it, And I told him, I said, hey man, because I didn't know everything that he did, but I had a piece of paper, and I was right, because I had to try and remember. I had written down when a fill's coming in, or I'd write notes to myself or what. And he was impressed that I took the time to write down like what he did. But anyway, some of the bands that I've played with, excellent musicians, I don't fault them, but sometimes it's like they didn't take the time to learn what did I play there. And it would bug me. I couldn't help it, It's like, and to me, it's like, okay, XL DVD's playing and we sound like a cover band trying to play XL DVD songs. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, DVD. We can't sound like a cover band that's kind of doing the song well, And so anyway, that one of these days, maybe I'll find a band that,
Yeah. So let's talk about the project with Dale Thompson. When's it coming out officially?
I think, and this is unofficial, but I believe it's coming out the end of March is what Rock's told me. That's what they're aiming for anyway.
Yeah.
There's been a few hiccups with it. Not too much, but it's probably a God timing thing, because I think it was supposed to come out. We wanted to have it come out in January, but it just wasn't ready. It wasn't ready. And I'm still doing some final touch up things on it, but it's about done. Scott Waters is going to get the stuff from me this weekend, and then they're going to get to work on putting it out.
Awesome.
It's tough, man.
Was it the kind of the situation where you just sent him music and he wrote from that, or did you guys collaborate on the whole songwriting process?
I did all the music. He did all the vocals. Okay. There's one song that we're both on. I do some background vocals on just one song, but he wrote all the lyrics. He did all the arrangements of the vocals, just the one song I kind of put my 2 cents in. But what happened was in 2020, I approached him and said, "Hey, Dale, do you want to do something together, He's like, "Well, send me a track." And I didn't have any tracks put together. I had a track that I did on a 4-track, like back in the early 2000s. And I said, "Well, it sounds rinky-dink and horrible, but maybe you can get a gist of it, So I sent it to him. He sent it back. He's like, "I like it." He goes, "I'm already writing lyrics to it." And I was like, "Okay, But 2020 was a pretty rough year for me, and everyone else. It was a rough year for me, and so I had to sit back, and it wasn't time. And so really, it was. I got studio stuff that I got blessed with some studio stuff in September of this year. So then I was ready to be able to record. So I contacted him again. I was like, "Hey, any chance of still doing a project, He's like, "You got some songs?" I'm like, "I'll have 3 to you off. I'll send 3 to you in about 4 days." He's okay. So I sent him the first 3 tracks. He's like, "These are excellent." By the next day he's so dang fast. By the next day he had all the lyrics done and sent back to me with these 3 songs. So I was like, "Okay, now I gotta bang these out." So I started banging out try to do about 3 songs a week and try to pick which ones I wanted to use. Basically, I just went into my archives of old metal songs, and there's only like 2 songs that are new. Everything else is just from, some of them go as far as back to 91, some the early 2000s, some maybe 5 years ago. But he had good things to say about it, which was, to me, was like cool, because I'm like, dude, when I was a teenager, I was listening to you, and I was, when I first became a Christian, you were one of the bands I listened to. It's, one of the things that helped me in my walk of being able to, because back then it was I needed back then to not listen to secular music. I had to stop listening to secular music because it was an idol in my heart at that time, I don't have any issues with it now. I mean, I don't care. I don't have I had 1,000 records back then, I think, and I don't really care now. So it's not an idol to me. But anyway, so I was listening to all Christian music back then, and Bride was it. I mean, Kinetic Faith was like, oh my gosh, when that came out, and Hired Gun, and Troubled Times. So I just always thought it'd be cool to do something with Dale. And now it's done. We got 12 songs. The Rock, and I'll send each of you guys. I'll send you one. I'll send you.
Oh no!
I'll send you a full track.
Oh wow!
That's awesome. I was going to ask you about Excel's innovation, which this is a departure from other things. Yeah, that's your wall in the background.
This is the room. That was when it was first getting started. I didn't have. It was like we had just moved in here, like a box. This is it.
That's awesome. This album feels more like almost like a 90s era alt rock record, as opposed to what I'm used to hearing you do. So explain a little bit about what led to that, or.
Well, in light of the influences that I mentioned to you, I've written over 1,000 songs, And I probably have recordings of, I don't know, at least 500 of them somewhere. I got boxes full of cassette tapes and 4-track masters. I don't even know where stuff is. But those are songs that, all of those songs except for, all of those songs are old songs. I think the newest, or the one that was written the soonest was like 2006 maybe. But some of them go way back to 90, 92, 90, you know. It's stuff that I wrote that if it would have came out then, would have been cutting edge stuff, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's still cool, but it is what it is. My plan is to put out the music God gave to me, even if it's way late, you know, like it is. I'm going to put out the songs he gave me. But those are all songs that I wrote about women, kind of, you know, like, I don't know. I just had this thing with wayward women. Of my heart went out to them. And I married a woman from the streets. You know, I married a woman that's been through some crazy stuff. And so I kind of wrote songs before I met her to her. And then I wrote songs that when we were in our marriage and going through some crazy stuff, I wrote stuff about. I'd write. That's where I was able to pour out my heart, is in my music. And sometimes I'm the only one that heard something that I poured out my heart to. But in this album, it's about the good times with my wife. It's about my love for my wife. It's about feelings of hatred toward my wife. It's about feelings of I want it to be done towards my wife. It's, you know, I wrote about the good and the bad, the you know, the infidelity that took place between both of us. You know, I mean, like I said, we've been through everything that every couple would divorce over. Everything, you know, fights, domestic fights, jail for it, you know, everything. You know, and to me, there's nothing better than just being honest about something. And, you know, a lot of these artists out there that write a song about a breakup or they're upset, well, most of the time they broke up with this person, then they write a song about it. Like they write, you know, I can't stand you, I hate you, whatever. It's like, well, we're making it, we're surviving, but I'm still going to put out the song about how I felt about you at one point in my life. Well, this was what was going on, you know? And, you know, I had thoughts of wanting to leave you. You had thoughts of wanting to leave me, you know, you know, the first song is probably one of the ones that's the most dear to my heart, because I was just pouring it out about, like, man, you know, the verses are all about me ragging on her. I don't like this about it. I can't stand this, you know. And then the hook is, my darling, you know, like you're my woman, you know, like, and you know, and I can't remember. Somebody did a review on it. It was a good review. I think it was Christian Metal, the guys over in Sweden, Christian Sullivan, and but anyway, and it wasn't him. It was Osborne that did it, but I can tell you paid attention to what I was saying and maybe perhaps been through some similar stuff. I mean, anyone who's been married for 2 or 3 years can relate with some of the stuff I'm talking about on the CD, you know. If you made it for 2 years, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But especially if you've made it 10 years. But anyway, yeah, that's what it is. It's like I just wrote those songs in kind of a pop format. Wanted to put them out. You know, so I was like, I'm gonna venture away from what anyone would expect my next album to be, and just I'm gonna do this, you know. And there's gonna be another one. There's gonna be another XL's Innovation, and of course there'll be some more XL DVD. But you know, I'm gonna kind of do that thing. I guess it's my Stone Sour, if you will.
Keep it rolling, man. Keep it rolling.
Yeah. So, just real quickly, what's inspiring you now? Like, you know, you're talking about all these songs that have been around, and I know you're writing new stuff too. Is there anything that's kind of inspiring you these days that's modern?
Well, man, I mean, yeah, and I have to wonder now: do I want to try to put out another Sodom in America, if you will? Or what I mean by that is like current topics that are as pressing as back then, or cutting edges, you know. I don't know how that will work nowadays because everyone is so divided on how they feel. Even Christians are. So, you know, I could come off one way and then, you know, just really not be accepted. Not that I would do anything to try to be accepted, you know, or that being the purpose. I haven't written songs in a long time. And I think my main focus is let me put out the songs that I did right that no one's heard. I got a bunch of songs that people haven't heard that are good songs, and I think I'm kind of more focused on let me try and do that. If God gives me a new song every here and there. I want to do a hip hop album. I haven't done. I put one out in 2005 with there was a record label called Fourth Man Records. This rapper named Frosty, and then him and Raps Galore, Dave Portillo from 12 Tribe. I don't know if you remember 12 Tribe or not. It was on Frontline. Yeah, those guys had a label, and I did a record with them. And then they allowed me to run a label out in Iowa, and put out some pretty good bands. We had distribution with Sony and Universal, and it was through with PGE. I don't know if you remember that the distribution group PGE. I think even like they put out some Deliverance and stuff once. But anyway, this guy, Christafari, and if Christafari is with them, he ran 30 labels. So he was distributing 30 labels.
Wow.
So I get in 2005, I get a label. I have a record label and I have major distribution. And I put out my record. We put out a couple other bands' records. And when it was time for the returns, no money. And not just no money. This dude disappeared with everyone's money. Like I got on the phone. I think the guy's name is Mark. I can't remember. Mark from Christafari. I was talking to him. We were trying to figure out how can we find this guy. He just disappeared. He owed Mark $30,000. He just took off with everyone's money. And so, yeah, anyway, that's a whole long story. But that was the last time I did a hip hop project. And I would like to maybe do one of those too. Just, put it all out,
I hate to hear stories like that. I mean, but there's so many stories like that in the Christian world, it stinks. We're the one place where it should be.
Then it was that he died and he had cancer, so he saved everyone's. He needed $500,000 for cancer. Then said he died, but nobody could find an obituary. So it's like, okay, But anyway, he was a Christian distributor. I guess doesn't mean necessarily that he. Who knows? Maybe he backs into what he used to do. Bought banks before he became a Christian or something. No.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Well, anything else, Brett? I mean, we could talk forever.
Oh, man. Really. Since you haven't listened to the episode, we pretty much just gushed on the whole album. Like, it really is one of my favorite albums. And we've already kind of said that. And such a ground. It wasn't just groundbreaking in the Christian industry. It was groundbreaking in general. And we were, and it was so cool to have that be a part of the Christian music industry, something that groundbreaking in music to my view at the time. And so I just appreciate you coming on and talking about your life and just some of your background, getting some of the backstory. It gives it so much more depth now. Because I've been listening to a lot of you in the last about 2 weeks. There's been a lot. I've texted Steve. I'm like, I've been listening to XL for like 2 weeks straight because like I keep going back to the Closure album, the beginning of Closure, dude. Man, the production on that is nice and it's heavier. It's got a heavier sound to it.
Yeah, I tuned down.
Yeah,
I tuned down, experimenting with some growling. Which I'm not going to try and do that. I want to keep everyone. You either got it or you don't.
So this has been a real treat for me. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on here, man. It's also a treat and a pleasure for me. I mean, it's cool when someone is interested in what the work you do and what God's given you. So I appreciate that. Back at you guys.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks again, Todd Stevens, XL. We'll put show notes together, links to all his music and where you can buy stuff, and keep an eye on our Facebook page and everything. We'll be promoting.
From Reconciled. That's the next thing coming out. XL and Del Thompson of Bride and all the other 20 bands he's in or whatever projects.
Oh, yeah.
That guy he's a singing beast.
And the vinyl for Sodom and America.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, that is super cool.
Yeah, we'll tell people about that when there's more news. So, but yeah,
absolutely. We'll keep everybody informed as best we can. But yeah, thanks again, Todd. You're the best.
Likewise. Thanks a lot, gentlemen.
Thank you. Peace out.
All right.